A huge sign outside read Mulch School for Revolting Children. A bell chimed. Ding! It was the beginning of the school day. Things started indecently early at Mulch School, at the break of dawn. That's how the headmaster liked it. The children having to get up in the middle of the night to be at school on time was all part of the torture. Ned smiled to himself at the thought of what naughtiness was to come as he began descending to the playground. Just as soon as the bird of slime's feet touched down, it placed Ned on a bench and then translimed back into a blob. The blob loomed behind the boy like a great slimy shadow. Let's give Mr. Rath something to be angry about, began the boy. Goody, goody! Not surprisingly, after seeing a giant bird of slime land in the playground, the teachers all hurried out of the old school building, pointing and shouting. Look, see them pointing and shouting there? I don't believe it! I won't believe it! I will believe it, but I can't believe it, shouted a third. Pupils of Mulch School all pressed their faces up against the classroom windows to see. They were too frightened of the teachers to dare step outside into the playground without permission. Then a man with a long black gown draped over his shoulders stormed out of the building. He whisked the cloak theatrically around him as if he were Count Dracula. Swish! It was only his teacher's gown, but it afforded him an air of evil that he relished. Mr. Rath, the headmaster, had a big bald head, so he looked like an egg with a little moustache drawn on it. This moustache would flare up whenever he exploded in rage. Look, see him there? Got that little egg head, hasn't he? Which was often, so often in fact, that Mr. Rath was in a rage more often than not. Take a look at this rageometer of Mr. Rath's typical day. There's a rageometer, and it just shows he goes from being just unhappy all the way through tantrum, frenzy, fury, and then beyond rage. That's pretty bad. That's a rageometer to tell how cranky he is. Mr. Roth raged at all the children in Mulch School as if it was the only school that was for all the children on the island. The lucky ones got whacked with a wooden ruler. The unlucky ones were whacked with a wooden ruler and then expelled. Landing giant birds in the playground is strictly forbidden, he raged at Ned as he marched toward him. Even though landing a giant slime bird in the playground was not covered in school rules, the headmaster was confident that he could invent a rule that said that. Mr. Rath had invented a long list of his own rules over his 30-year reign of terror at Mulch School. Rath's rules. Number 1, no comparing me to an egg. I do not look like an egg. Eggs do not have moustaches, and I have a moustache, so that's the end of it. Anyone who does compare me to an egg will be expelled. Also, my head is a lot bigger than an egg, and I have ears, and last time I checked, eggs do not. Rule number 2, no breaking wind on school premises without a letter of consent from the headmaster, even if a bottom burp comes out by accident when you catch a cricket ball, you will be expelled. Rule number 3, no laughing at school. You have not come to school to laugh. Crying, sobbing, or bawling of any kind is welcome, though. There's no better sound than a child blubbering. Anyone heard laughing will be struck with a wooden ruler and expelled. Number 4, no excuses whatsoever for late homework. I don't care if your house took off in a tornado or you were abducted by aliens. If your homework is so much as 1 second late, you will be expelled. Number 5, no moaning about school dinners. Shoefish are incredibly tasty and can be used in every single dish in the school canteen. Shoefish spread, shoefish pie. Look. Oh, not that one. See, you shoefish bread and shoefish pie. Yuck. Doesn't look nice, does it? Looks horrible. shoefish stew, shoefish curry, shoefish cake, shoefish mousse, shoefish chocolate cake, shoefish surprise, the surprise being that it's made of shoefish. Anyone overheard moaning about school dinners will be forced to finish their school dinner before they're expelled. Number 6, no wearing your tie the wrong way around so the skinny part is on the outside and the wide part is on the inside. Anyone found with their school tie the wrong way will be spun around by their tie and expelled out of the window. Rule number 7, no playing in the playground. At break time and lunchtime, you're only permitted to stand around in the rain. There will be no playing of games. Any child caught playing games will be forced to stand outside in the rain and then expelled. Number 8, no chocolate allowed on school premises. Any chocolate will be confiscated personally by me. I will then dispose of the chocolate by eating it. Anyone who refuses to hand over the chocolate will not be expelled. They will be held upside down by their ankles and dangled out of the window until they hand over the chocolate. After I've eaten the chocolate, then and only then will they be expelled. Rule number 9, no sneezing during lessons. It is disruptive to your work. If you do feel a tickle in your nose telling you that a sneeze is coming on, then for goodness sake, wait until you return home and then you can sneeze. Anyone hearing sneezing in the school will be expelled, just as a sneeze expels snot from your nose. A handy metaphor for as children equals snot. Number 10, no complaining about how many rules there are in school. Anyone found complaining will not be expelled, as that is what they want. Instead, they'll be put down a year, every year, and be forced to stay at school forever. Just ask old man Giles. He's 92 and he's been at Mulch School all his life. Ned was one of hundreds of children who'd been expelled from the school over the years. The headmaster had expelled so many that there were now more teachers than children at the school. But now Ned was back and he was ready for revenge. And look, there is the old man Giles that's been at school all those years and he's 92. Chapter 11, Blazing Bottom. Mr. Rath had been careful not to expel all the children at his school. If he did, there'd be no children left to expel. And he loved expelling children. Once, a child on their very first day at school was expelled for skipping through the school gates. It was a new record for Mr. Rath, expelling a child who'd been at school for less than 3 seconds. As for Ned, the boy was expelled for the simple crime of laughing. He'd done. In fairness to Mr. Rath, the boy was laughing because in art class, the children were charged with decorating an egg for Easter, and Ned had painted his egg to look just like Mr. Rath. This was much to his and everybody else's amusement. Okay. That's what he'd done, and then he'd laughed. Look at that. It does look a bit like Mr. Rath, doesn't it? Except the head's rounder. He laughed long and loud. Like that. "You, boy," bellowed the headmaster. "What are you doing back in my school? You're expelled." "Hello again, sir," chirped Ned. He didn't sound too bothered. It's impossible to be expelled when you've already been expelled. "And what on earth is this monstrosity you've brought with you?" spat Rath. "What a dreadful little man," murmured Slime. "Whatever shall we do with him?" Ned thought for a moment. We need to teach the headmaster a lesson. Us kids have suffered his rages for long enough. Rath is always in a rage about something. Let's finally give him something to be really, 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 really angry about. "Splendid. Now let me think." "Too late, Blobby," shouted Mr. Rath. "I'm going to punish this boy severely. Do you hear me? Severely." With that, the headmaster whipped out the long wooden ruler he'd been concealing under his cloak. Rath lunged at the boy, ready to strike. Thwack, thwack, thwack went the ruler as it chopped through the air. Just as Mr. Rath was about to cause Ned excruciating pain, slime shape-shifted into a giant octopus, a sloctopus. One of the sloctopus's arms wrestled the ruler from the headmaster, while another one looped round the man's ankles. Before Mr. Rath could shout, "Expelled!" the sloctopus lifted him high into the air. Ned laughed as he looked to see his old headmaster upside down above him. "I'll get you for this, boy!" screamed Mr. Rath. "I'm not sure you will," said the boy. "Let him go!" shouted the teachers gathered in the playground. "Actually, I don't mind if you keep him," muttered the bearded deputy head. Mr. Lust had long been lusting after the top job at the school. "What now, my young friend?" asked the sloctopus. "Spin Mr. Rath round like he spins round that ruler of his," replied the boy. "I don't mind if I do." So the sloctopus spun the headmaster faster and faster and faster still. It was as if Mr. Rath were on a particularly puke-tastic fairground ride. "Let go now," commanded Ned. The sloctopus released its grip, and Mr. Rath went flying through the air. "Whiz! Ah!" he cried as he zoomed up to the clouds. There was an eerie silence for a moment when it looked as if Mr. Rath might be heading for outer space. The sound of whistling cut through the quiet. All the eyes in the playground searched the sky. "There!" shouted Ned. "What a shame," muttered Mr. Lust, stroking his beard. There was a tiny glow of red light high in the morning sky. As it began to descend, Ned exclaimed, "It's Mr. Rath's bottom burning up as he re-enters the atmosphere." Before you complain to me about this, let me inform you this is science. Ah! So you can see there. Oops, wrong picture. That was the Apollo spaceship entering, and this was Mr. Rath and his bottom on fire. And he's yelling out loud, very loudly. "Ah!" cried Mr. Rath as he plunged through the sky. Fortunately for the headmaster, he crash-landed into the sea. Splosh! There was a sound of sizzling as the water put out the blazing fire on Mr. Rath's bottom cheeks. Then the headmaster cried, "Help! I can't swim!" "Let's not be too hasty," said Mr. Lust. "Tea and biscuits, anyone?" Ned nodded to Slime. They couldn't let the man drown. The sloctopus reached out one of its arms. It grew longer and longer and longer until it reached all the way into the sea. And then the sloctopus plucked the headmaster up, who was bobbing in the waves, and deposited him back into the playground. Splat! All the teachers had to stifle their giggles at the sight of their headmaster looking most undignified. Ha ha ha! Rath was soaking wet, and the seat of his trousers had burned right through. Everyone could see his bright red bottom still blazing from his descent. It was so red it looked like a baboon's bottom. All the school children still had their faces pressed up against the classroom windows, and now they were laughing. So that's when he got dropped off, and that's him on the ground. And they were laughing at the headmaster. They laughed and laughed. No one laughed harder than Old Man Giles, the 92-year-old pupil whose punishment was being put down a year every year. He'd been at Mulch School the longest, 87 years to be precise. Old Man Giles chortled so hard that his false teeth shot out and hit the window. Clunk! And that only made him laugh more. If Rath were an egg, he would now be scrambled. "Goodbye, sir," chirped Ned sarcastically. The sloctopus transformed into a hot air balloon, a slalloon, and it whisked the boy up from the bench and into the sky. "My ruler!" bellowed Rath. On cue, the slalloon dropped the ruler and it landed on the headmaster's head with a clunk, and all the children laughed. "Do come back again soon and finish him off, please," called out Mr. Lust.